Discover the incredible truth. After losing 100K, Mom's transformation unfolds when she packs up. Annie stood in the half-lit room, boxes surrounding her like sentinels marking her defeat. The faded scent of coffee lingered, nauseatingly sweet yet devoid of warmth. She picked up a ceramic mug, its colorful glaze chipped, a shadow of what once filled her cafe with life. 100,000 debts that now loomed over her like a storm cloud. How had her dreams of brewing joy turned into this cacophony of failure? She shuddered, perhaps the weight of her children's futures pressed down harder than the debt itself. "Dinner's ready, Mom," echoed from the kitchen, where her two children, Lily and Max, awaited a meal that felt more like an obligation than a gathering. What's going to happen to us? Question they posed chipped away at her resolve. They didn't yet fully understand the magnitude of their circumstances, but Annie could see the flicker of worry in their eyes. Their innocent laughter had morphed into whispers of sacrifice. School trips and new shoes were luxuries now measured against their dinner portions. It pierced her heart that they had to grapple with such realities. With trepidation, she stepped into the dim light of their small kitchen. "What did you learn at school today?" she ventured, trying to maintain a facade of normalcy. Yet, the question hung in the air, brittle and unconvincing. Their hesitant responses were suffocated by unspoken fears. As a mother, she carried the weight of her dreams, but now she felt her power slipping through her fingers like the cafe's once beloved espresso beans, ground into bitterness. As night fell, her mind drifted to Sarah, her best friend. A whisper of hope in this fractured landscape. "Annie, remember your art?" Sarah's words resonated with an echo of a time when Annie felt invincible, when vibrant colors danced across her canvas. But fear crept in, gnawing at her. Could she really resurrect her shattered dreams through design? Doubt stung sharper than any adversity she had faced, but maybe this was the flicker of light she desperately needed. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. With renewed determination, she started designing custom mugs. It filled her with excitement, spreading like warm coffee through her veins. She found herself sharing her progress on social media, receiving little heart emojis and comments that fueled her ambition. Yet, as whispers of doubt from her previous failures flared up again in her mind, the bubbling excitement cooled. Why did she think she could succeed now? Would the community really welcome her back? Just when it seemed she was on the verge of crafting a new identity, she encountered Martin, a retired mogul who offered guidance. Annie was buoyed, but soon betrayal sliced through her hope like a shard of glass. What if you end up failing again? The internal conversation churned. Anxious thoughts spiraled, questioning everything she dared to build. With sorrowful eyes gazing into a familiar past, the question pulsed through her mind: would pursuing vengeance provide solace for her bruised spirit, or would it bind her further to old grievances? As the weight of her choices loomed, in the shadows of betrayal, Annie stood at the brink of decision, heart pounding with uncertainty. Could her journey of transformation truly prevail, or was she destined to remain shackled by fear, cluttering her dreams? A question that lingered like unsaid words, thickening the air around her. Annie's mind raced as she stared at her smartphone, her fingers hovering over the screen, undecided yet tantalized by the possibility of a new beginning. The social media notifications swirled before her eyes like autumn leaves caught in a gust of wind. Likes for her designs, encouraging comments, and even a few messages from those she hadn't spoken to in a while. In spite of the clamor of self-doubt echoing in her ears, there lay a path she hadn't noticed before. A path that could redefine everything. Maybe I can turn this around, she whispered to herself, allowing a fragile thread of hope to bind her heart. Each message was a call to arms, beckoning her to reclaim her passion for art amidst the engulfing shadows of fear. But could she truly transform these digital gestures into a tangible means of support, one that could lift her family from the rabbit hole of financial despair. That evening, as her children slept, she sank into her worn-out armchair. The late-night silence enveloped her like a thick quilt, and her mind cascaded through memories of her artistry, the colors that flowed so freely, the way paint would spring to life under her touch. It felt like eons since she had allowed herself to indulge in that creativity. She rummaged through the boxes and unearthed her old sketchbooks, dust motes dancing in the dim light as their pages unveiled a collection of untold stories. Each drawing, every whimsical character seemed acutely aware of her plight, and for the first time in months, she felt a flicker of purpose ignite. The next morning, she picked up her brushes, but a sudden thought pierced her clarity. What if my designs didn't just reflect my pain but could inspire others? It was an audacious idea, daring enough to challenge her limits. It became her mission to create a series of designs that illustrated resilience and rebirth. If she could channel her struggles into visible artistry, perhaps others could find solace in it. Days turned into weeks as she busied herself with vibrant hues and evocative sketches. Each design served as a therapy session, unraveling her fears, rebuilding her confidence stitch by stitch. She set her sights on local craft fairs and boutiques, desperate to showcase her creations, and each application she sent out was a delicate tug at her self-worth. But she also began producing online tutorials, sharing her creative process, embracing the vulnerability that came with it. The outpouring of support from her followers was overwhelming, filling the gaps where her self-doubt once resided. Yet beneath the surface of her burgeoning success, anxiety festered like an uninvited guest. What was once a passion had morphed into a relentless pursuit of validation. Every sale in her online shop seemed to come with the weight of expectation. Could she sustain this momentum, or would inevitable decline swallow her whole again? She stood in front of her easel one evening, strokes of paint brimming with emotion, but the canvas bore witness to an internal battle. She felt the presence of failure lurking. That familiar oppressive weight returned. Uncertainty wrapped itself around her like a chain, reminding her of how swiftly joy could turn to pain. Finally, amidst swirling thoughts, she reached for her phone. She hesitated, contemplating how to ask her old friend Sarah for advice. She was a steadfast pillar, but one who had witnessed Annie's previous struggles. Wasn't it the fear of judgment that had kept her silent for so long? Why should she risk exposing this fragile part of herself again? As the world moved around her, Annie gravitated toward a decision that felt both liberating and terrifying. It was time she confronted her past, not just her failures, but her fear of opening up. The decision cascaded through her. Would this conversation herald a new dawn or merely be a reminder of what had been lost? The moment of truth loomed, and the thread of her artistic revival hung in the balance between empowerment and exposure. Would she step into the light or retreat into her shadow once more? Annie's heart pounded in her chest as she dialed Sarah's number, each ring amplifying her anxiety. It felt surreal, standing at the crossroads of vulnerability and resistance. When the call connected, Sarah's cheerful voice provided a momentary reprieve from the storm raging within her. "Annie, it's been too long. How are you?" "Hey, Sarah. I've been working on some new things," Annie stammered, feeling the weight of the conversation broaden. The warmth in Sarah's voice soothed her momentarily. "I'm trying to get back into art. You might even say I'm trying to start over." There was a pause on the other end as Sarah absorbed Annie's admission. "Starting over? That's exciting. What are you creating?" Annie felt momentum as she described her recent designs, how they were inspired by resilience and rebirth. As she spoke, a shift occurred. Her voice steadied, infused with enthusiasm. Each brushstroke echoed her journey, transforming despair into something tangible. "That sounds amazing!" Sarah exclaimed. "You've always had such a gift. Are you planning to sell them?" That question lingered in the air like an echo. Annie hesitated, a lump forming in her throat. The initial exhilaration of sharing her passion clouded with stark reality. "I've tried, but it's hard. Every sale feels like a test. What if it's not enough? What if I fail again?" "Annie, you're not that person anymore." "You've learned so much from the past," Sarah replied, a gentle reminder that felt both affirming and haunting. You're brave for putting yourself out there again. Believe in your art. Belief. It was a fragile notion, threatening to break under the weight of doubt. As they finished their conversation, Annie felt lighter yet burdened, simultaneously inspired and terrified. The call had nudged open the door to her authenticity, but she was less certain about stepping through. Over the next few days, Annie executed her next step, documenting her struggles and victories through video tutorials. She prepared to wield her past as a teaching tool, hoping to inspire others while solidifying her own resolve. The uncertainty of sharing her story intermingled with a newfound determination. Each recorded moment became a confrontation with her self-doubt, revealing the layers beneath her artistic heart. As her online presence grew, Annie devoted the evenings to recording. The vulnerability of sharing her journey felt like straddling a tightrope. One misstep could send her spiraling back into silence. Yet, paradoxically, each click of the camera acted as a healing balm, urging her to articulate her emotions and rediscover the childlike joy that painting once brought her. However, the psychological weight remained palpable. Comments flowed in, some supportive, but others hovered with critiques tinged with doubt. "This isn't good enough," a voice inside her head muttered during quiet moments. "What makes you think you can do this?" She learned, painfully, to question those voices, though the struggle was exhausting. As the weeks unfolded, Annie received an invitation to showcase her work at a local gallery, a testament to the encouragement she'd gathered online. It was tempting to see this as a milestone. But the opportunity bristled with anxiety. Would enough people be interested? Would it validate her efforts, or merely highlight the chasm between aspiration and reality? Standing in the twilight against the backdrop of possibilities, she felt both empowered and ensnared by her self-expectations. Moments of inspiration blended with shadows of doubt, creating a tapestry of emotions she didn't quite understand. In a burst of resolve amidst uncertainty, she chose not to think about what anyone else expected. Instead, she'd funnel her energy into the art. Into the process, the act itself rather than the outcome ensured its importance. But as the night of the gallery opening approached, an unsettling thought began gnawing at her. If she faced that crowd, if she chose to stand in vulnerable authenticity, would she conquer her fears? Or would she once again confront the demons of her past? The tension mounted, and Annie realized this was not merely a night of showcasing her art. This moment represented her decision to confront everything she feared, every failure, every doubt. The stage was set, but would she step into the light, or would she falter once more? The evening of the gallery opening arrived, shaded in hues of anxiety and anticipation. Annie stood before her collection, the artwork splashed across the walls like fragments of her soul. Each piece told a story, a glimpse into her journey through despair and rebirth, yet beneath the vibrant colors lurked the whispers of self-doubt. As the clock ticked closer to the start of the event, her palms dampened, and her breathing quickened. A swirl of guests filled the room, murmurs of excitement punctuating the air. They stood before her paintings, interpreting what was once buried deep within her. For a fleeting moment, she felt proud, but then the doubts re-entered. Were they humoring her? Would they see her art as it truly was a reflection of hard-fought battles or merely childish scribbles? Focus on the art, she chanted internally like a mantra. But she couldn't ignore the gnawing anxiety that threatened to unravel her confidence. The very thought of revealing herself was paralyzing. She stepped back from her pieces. Perhaps hiding behind them would shield her from judgment. Meeting familiar faces offered little solace. Sarah, her anchor through these turbulent times, approached with glowing praise. "Annie, they're breathtaking." "You've gone so far," she beamed, eyes wide with enthusiasm. "Thanks, but I don't know if they really resonate," Annie replied, the shadow of disbelief casting over her words. "Are you serious? Look at everyone gathering around you." Sarah gestured to the crowd, many nodding appreciatively as they pointed towards specific artworks. Yet Annie felt an unsettling disconnect between the appreciation of others and the esteem she still grappled to find within herself. She turned back to her paintings. With each visitor that approached her with compliments, A part of her wanted to thank them, but another recoiled in fear. "I'm terrified, Sarah. What if they don't really mean it?" Her voice was a whisper, barely breaking through the ambient noise. "They might surprise you," Sarah replied, placing a firm hand on Annie's shoulder. "You've got to give yourself a chance to accept it." Her friend's words felt different, an invitation to consider the possibility of acceptance. What if she chose to trust that her art spoke for her, to embrace the very vulnerability that felt like a weight on her chest? Just as she contemplated this shift, she caught sight of a figure moving unsteadily toward her. It was a local critic, known for dissecting with brutal honesty. A pit formed in her stomach. This could go either way. Annie held her breath, waiting for the onslaught of criticism she feared. But to her astonishment, when the critic reached her, he inspected a piece titled Resilience. Annie felt her heart race, every muscle tense, the looming moment dragging out like an eternity. "This speaks to loss and recovery in ways I rarely witness in contemporary art," he finally said, his voice measured but not without warmth. "It feels authentic. Thank you for sharing it." That simple acknowledgement snipped an invisible tether of conditional worth she had wrapped around herself. For the first time, she felt her breath steady, her heart break out of the panic grip it had held throughout the night. Perhaps it wasn't perfect, perhaps it would never be, but it was a piece of her. It was honest, it was raw. She had poured herself into it, and now, facing her fear of judgment, she realized something profound. This quest for validation need not dictate her art or self-worth. As the evening wore on, the crowd shifted from admiration into a community of shared stories, each individual captivated not just by the art but by the resonance of shared struggle. Annie found pieces of herself reflected back in others' eyes, and the notion of isolation began to evaporate. She stepped forward to engage more openly, allowing the conversation to flow rather than retreating. Empowered by this newfound connection, she understood this was not just about selling art, it was about creating a dialogue, fostering courage through vulnerability. But just as her confidence began to flourish, a challenging thought crept in. Would this moment of connection hold strong when the applause faded? Would she have the strength to continue her journey beyond this night? As she glanced at her collection once more, fresh uncertainty took hold. Tonight was a step, yes, a significant one, but the road ahead remained shadowed with questions. Annie took a deep breath, ready to embrace whatever came next. The night's success stoked a fire within her, but deep inside the recesses of her mind, a daunting question loomed larger. What if the real challenge had just begun? The next morning greeted Annie with the kind of clarity that often eludes sleep-deprived souls. Her mind hummed with anticipation for the creative experiment she had set in motion, intertwining her aspirations with the shadows she had previously avoided. In the bright embrace of daylight, the self-doubt that had lingered like a specter seemed weaker, urging her to act rather than retreat. She set about transforming her small apartment into a makeshift studio, a sacred space meant for honesty rather than perfection. With a palette of muted colors, an array of brushes, and stacks of canvases strewn about haphazardly, she felt the familiar pulse of creativity thrumming beneath her skin. This time, however, she aimed to express the unfiltered truth of her experiences, not the polished revival of triumphs. As the day unfolded, she felt a mix of exhilaration and trepidation. Sitting before an empty canvas, she observed the quietude most artists dread. Would she even have the courage to paint her contradictions, to reveal the intimate battles etched into her essence? Doubt whispered insistently, but today, she intended to work through it, not around it. Annie envisioned the piece, a raw depiction of her insecurities splashed against vibrant colors symbolizing hope and resilience. How could she possibly convey years of fear in a single stroke? The thought tightened her throat, but she knew the power of confronting those fears head-on. She remembered the feedback that had once shaken her. What if she could refashion that feedback into a tool of empowerment? Choosing her colors with deliberation, she began to paint. Each brushstroke infused with conviction and hesitation alike, revealing moments of heartache juxtaposed with flickers of joy. The canvas became not merely an artwork but a testament to her evolution, a manifestation of her internal conflict. She felt alive with every application, every color a piece of herself unveiled. Hours passed, and amidst the chaos of her thoughts, a revelation struck. She actually thrived on vulnerability. This knowledge shifted something within her, igniting a recognition of her latent power. She could alchemize her struggles into art, converting pain into beauty. For the first time, she realized that authenticity didn't merely reside in her experiences, but flourished through how she chose to articulate them through her art. Yet, progress was never linear. Frustrations bubbled as she painted over sections that felt forced or misrepresented. Each misstep reflected her ongoing internal war, and she felt a familiar pang of anxiety. Was she revealing too much? Would this piece render her emotions vulnerable to judgment rather than understanding? The echoes of that workshop lingered in her mind, reawakened insecurities entwined with budding determination. Resting her brush, she examined her creation, her heart pounding as she observed the tension in her canvas. It was both a companion and a mirror, reflecting not only the darkness, but the promise of light. Acceptance was encapsulated in every imperfect form. She understood now that her art would embody the complexity of her existence. As Annie stood back, she felt an unshakable urgency to share this process, her truth, as an emerging artist, not defined by flawless technique, but by raw sincerity. The pieces of her soul, riddled with scars and triumphs alike, yearned to connect with others. Yet, there was still a flicker of hesitance sparked by fear of vulnerability, reminding her that the next step loomed ahead. Cloaked in uncertainty, she lifted her phone, contemplating the moment of revelation that awaited. What would it mean to unveil her artistic process and let others witness her journey? Would transparency breed further connection, or would it incite criticism that might lead her back to the depths of doubt? A drumming rhythm echoed in her chest as she weighed her next move. Could she take a step beyond her comfort zone and embrace this next chapter? The boundaries of her journey began to shift before her. She sensed the burgeoning potential of transformation unveiled, a tightrope walk between authenticity and anxiety. The air thickened with unresolved tension as she decided. The moment had come to confront not only her fears, but also her potential, to decide once and for all whether vulnerability could indeed lead to liberation. Uncertain yet driven by a newfound clarity, Annie prepared to share her artistic endeavor with the world, heart racing as she typed the words that might forever alter her path. Could this be the unveiling she didn't know she needed? Annie stood before her completed piece, its colors swirling with the intensity of her emotions. This canvas wasn't merely a painting, it was a testament to her journey, a celebration of resilience, vulnerability, and the messy components of self-acceptance she had long shied away from. The room was illuminated by the warm morning light that spilled through her window, casting an ethereal glow over her work. It felt alive. She took a deep breath and opened her social media account, her fingers trembling over the screen. The video she recorded captured her moment of truth as she explained the meaning behind each brushstroke, the fears and hopes interwoven into the fabric of her creation. She bared her soul, sharing the doubt that once roamed her mind relentlessly, the moments of despair, and the flickers of joy that broke through the shadows. Submitting the post felt monumental, akin to shedding a skin that had long weighed her down. The weight of anticipation tightened around her chest, a mix of exhilaration and vulnerability flooding through her veins. Would her followers accept this raw glimpse into her world, or would they retreat into judgment? With a deep inhale, she hit publish. The moment hung suspended in time before she allowed herself to exhale, the fear mingled with excitement. Minutes turned into hours, and the initial pulse of anxiety began to wane as notifications flooded her phone. Positive comments streamed in, affirmations of shared experience and gratitude for her honesty. "This resonates," one follower wrote. "Thank you for being brave enough to share." Another typed, "This piece is beautiful and speaks volumes." Validation washed over her like a balm, soothing the tender areas of once raw self-criticisms and anxieties. This experience was unlike any she had navigated before. Instead of performing for validation, she opened herself to the possibility of connection through authenticity. In confirming her growth and courage, She was met with a community of souls who echoed the struggles she had so long believed were hers to bear alone. Days passed, and amidst the endless cycle of creating and sharing, Annie found herself receiving invitations to collaborate on projects, display her work at local galleries, and even speak about her artistic journey. It was as if the universe had conspired to reward her bravery. Each new opportunity further solidified her confidence, each interaction another affirmation of her place within the artistic world. One evening, a gallery owner approached her after a local exhibition, speaking of how her work had captivated audiences with its depth and sincerity. "You've crafted an emotional narrative that resonates. This isn't just art, it's a movement," he said, sparking within her a flame of recognition. The praise felt different this time, well-deserved and firmly grounded in the reality of her resilience. Annie smiled, each word anchoring her burgeoning confidence, shaping her into an artist of tangible influence. Months later, she found herself standing in another gallery, showcasing an entire collection centered around the themes of rebirth and authenticity. As guests mingled, discussing her pieces filled with warmth and nostalgia, Annie felt solid in her vision, confident in her choices, and proud of her identity as an artist. No longer tethered to the whispers of self-doubt, she experienced a profound sense of belonging. Annie's journey had evolved far beyond the simple act of painting. She had conquered the depths of despair, reaching a pinnacle where clarity and confidence reigned supreme. She stood tall, adorned not just with artistic accolades, but with the wisdom of embracing vulnerability. It wasn't merely the accolades or the followers that defined her growth. It was the unwavering understanding that embracing her true self, flaws and all, had ultimately led her to this moment. In that gallery, as she soaked in the vibrant discussions and affirming glances, Annie realized that the journey of transformation never truly ends. It continually unfolds with each brushstroke of authenticity she shares. She had not only found herself again, but had transformed into a beacon of hope for others traversing similar paths. Annie smiled at the thought. She had achieved what she once believed impossible, demonstrating unshakable strength in the face of fear. In fully accepting herself, she had reclaimed her narrative, something richer and more vibrant than she had ever dreamed. You need to subscribe now to our channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about this inspiring conclusion, and don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this empowering transformation.